Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So this video is dedicated to the spoiler summary of the latest Siege of Terra book, which is Saturnine by Dan Abnett. If you are reading the book, if you haven't read the book and you don't want to be spoiled, then please turn back now, stop the video and get out of here. This is your first and only warning. For the rest of you who are still here, let's jump in and let's get started. If you want to read along with me, there's a link to the paste bin in the description of the video. I don't know if you prefer to do that, it's whatever you bloody choose, but if you prefer my voice, then here we go. So the book opens up with Cinderman. Cinderman is in one of the palace gardens and he's actually thinking about suicide. He meets Dorn in the gardens and he actually asks Dorn, "Are you afraid of what the storm is about to be unleashed?" Dorn replies that he doesn't know. He describes what he's currently feeling to Cinderman. Cinderman points out that is indeed fear and asks the Primarch what is he afraid of. Dorn tells too many things, everything for now. He is afraid of being afraid, basically. Dorn asks Cinderman not to tell Rabuti about this. Cinderman says he is glad that Dorn isn't thinking of escaping in the same he was. As I mentioned, he was thinking about suicide. He was basically thinking of jumping off the palace gardens and throwing himself to his death. Dorn tells him he doubts that a 1,000-meter fall would kill a Primarch. Some interesting things about Dorn himself. Dorn absolutely hates the idea of censorship. It runs against the ideals of the society that he was building during the Great Crusade. Despite the fact he utterly opposes everything the woman Keela represents, he would have defended her right of speech in better times, but now things have changed. Words are very, very dangerous. Since the siege has begun, the palace and the crest beneath it has shifted 8 centimeters west. That's due to all the bombardment, fire and everything like that. Sanguinius considers Abaddon to be the greatest and finest of all of the first captains. Before all of this, he was the ideal warrior among the legions. And on the subject of Abaddon, Abaddon thinks his mind may be equal to that of Perturabos in orchestrating warfare. Though Abaddon respected Perturabos at artistry, when it comes to his genius, he frowned upon how detached it was. It was theory and practice side by side. Abaddon's way is practice and execution. If Pert would win it, it would be with a push of a button. Abaddon would get stuck in and win this war with a swing of a sword. After all, sword and guts won the wars of the Great Crusade, and they should win this war that way too. Abaddon sees that Perturabo is visibly in his element during the siege. As Abaddon puts it, he is happy as a grox in shit, which of course means he's very, very happy. Watching Perturabo work increases Abaddon's awed respect for the Primarch. It becomes clear that no one can do it better. Abaddon took mental notes of Perturabo's plan to better learn from a master. Now, moving on to some other stuff, Sanguinius confronts a formation of Titans, 1 Warlord and 3 Warhound escorts. He begins stabbing one of the Warhounds in its head and causing it some serious damage. The Warlord reacts to protect its escort by targeting the angelic Primarch with its weapons. The Primarch outtraced the apocalyptic weapons of the Warlord and soared up. He dragged his spear through the flank of the Titan, creating an ugly gash in its side, and then stabbed the Titan in the back of its head. He pushed the spear deep into the base of the Warlord's skull and held firm as the Titan started booming and snorting and choking noises from its warhorns as it began to shake and convulse. The Warlord Titan then fell apart and crumbled down to earth. Sanguinius flew down and stood at the side of his titanic kill and gazed at the 3 Warhounds as they bathed him in their target-seeking systems. The Primarch yelled, "Try if you like. Shall we continue?" In unison, the Warhound Titans turned back and fled. Now, the title of the book is called Saturnine, and that refers to the Saturnine Wall. Dorn discovered a flaw in the Saturnine Wall, a crack that Perturabo surely knows about and will use. If the Saturnine Wall falls, then the way to the inner palace would be clear. Perturabo would need to send a special elite force to take the crack in order to buy time to fortify the flaw in the Saturnine Wall. A ruse needs to show to be enacted. Dorn decided that all of this crisis points, it's the Eternity Wall port that would be sacrificed to trick Perturabo into thinking the Loyalists were ignorant of the flaw. Losing the port would allow the traitors to land more forces on the planet, which would shorten the estimated holdout for 4 months. Furthermore, it would end any hope of evacuating the Emperor off Terra. Since the Emperor doesn't want to leave Terra, it's the most affordable to lose. However, the redeployed Imperial forces that will defend the port will face certain destruction. Vigil commanders, Janita Kroll, which is basically the big sister of Silence Person, that acted as a null ward for the Vital Council, volunteered to be part of this doomed defense. There would be demons there for sure, and it was her duty to face them. Dorn asked Cinderman to create a group of remembrances in order to record the history of the siege, so there would be something to look forward to after the war, since this isn't the end. The symbol of this new remembrance order is an eye for the interrogators, which they'll be known as, because they have to run around and interview people to extract information and record it. They are authorized to use force in these interviews. Not everything they record will be brought to light. Some of it will have to be buried. So technically, Rogel Dorn kind of founded the Inquisition. Make of that what you want. Back to Abaddon and Perturabo. Abaddon's trying to push Perturabo towards the Saturnine plan to take the floor and, you know, breach the wall and go straight for the inner palace. Abaddon manages to push the right buttons to get him to agree. Abaddon appeals to the glory of a clean victory, one divorce from filth of the warp, Marine versus Marine, clean and simple. No one would deny the immortal glory of Perturabo after that. Perturabo sees through Abaddon's true motives for wanting the attack. Abaddon has something to prove. He wants to win through a military victory, to stand victorious as Abaddon the soldier, not Abaddon the child of the warp. Now, during this exchange, Abaddon actually pushes the right buttons for Perturabo's anger mode, let's say. Abaddon gets grabbed by Perturabo, he's basically getting choked out, his face is getting spat on, then he gets flung across the chambers. To Abaddon's credit, though, he basically shrugs it off and keeps talking to Perturabo until he agreed, about the Saturnine plan. Once Perturabo was on board, Abaddon told him how he can basically get open up some back channels to get Fulgrim to move in and support the Saturnine plan. Now, moving on to other characters, we actually have Ahriman, who is standing next to Mortarion waiting for the arrival of Magnus. Ahriman is subtly goading Mortarion, and this is kind of like light teasing and hides behind an absolute burning relish as what happened to Mortarion, basically because of what happened at the Council of Nicaea and everything like that. The loudest and most self-righteous critic that began the spark that burned Prospero, which was Mortarion, because he absolutely hated Psychers. All the accusers of the Thousand Sons were punished and broken, but Mortarion suffered a fate far worse than they. He couldn't even keep to his principles. His strength meant nothing in the end. He submitted to the warp and became one of them. Ahriman would savour Mortarion's suffering and shame forever. Magnus arrives and has a short conversation with Mortarion. Magnus tells the Pale King that he wants to bury the hatchet with him. He wants him to know that he forgives him. Magnus says they are both now what he hated. The pain that he must fear must be unbearable, but in suffering he finds his strength. Mortarion's submission was not a weakness, it's no shame. Magnus understands and bears no ill towards him. Mortarion took a moment to process this and whispered that he hates what he has become. Magnus responds by saying that he knows that and he feels no resentment towards Mortarion. Magnus steps closer to Mortarion and places his hand on Mortarion's shoulders. He tells the Pale King that he has his gifts longer and can show him how to harness them. Magnus then uses his power to ease the pain of Mortarion. Mortarion is puzzled by the kindness of Magnus. Magnus just simply says that there is one enemy now and it's their live father. Mortarion nods and departs to the battle. As Mortarion disappears in the distance, Ahriman and Magnus converse with each other. It appears that Magnus might not meant everything he said to Mortarion, since he plans to just use him and the rest of his brothers as tools to breach the walls and retake what was lost to him. He merely helped Mortarion to stop the pain from dulling his abilities. Back to the Saturnine plan, Abaddon decides to keep the Saturnine operation a secret from Horus, since Horus has a habit of dominating things, stamping them with his mark and making improvements. In this situation, Horus meddling might kill the operation before it got off the ground. Sanguinius' psychic powers act up and he's projected into the minds of his brothers, both traitor and loyalist, Angron, Dorn, and finally Perturabo. Sanguinius is awed by the willpower and strength of Perturabo's mind, his unbreakable focus and his genius at siege warfare. Sanguinius realizes that of all of his fallen brothers, Perturabo is the most dangerous, especially in a siege. In this siege, he would rather face Horus up close than fight Perturabo at a distance. Because of this, he is glad that Dorn was present at Terra. Only Dorn can match Perturabo. Jagatai Khan is fighting the Death Guard at the Colossi gate. The Death Guard ranks started to part to allow 8 horrible, massive figures to descend on the battlefield. Titanic demons, each one of them no less than a warhound in size. At their sight, the Khan feels an icy grip of terror in his heart. From a distance, 2 figures watch this unfold. Mortarion, who is using his forces to draw out the enemy, and Ahriman, the sorcerer, who summoned the demons that will use them to see their enemies broken. Now, since the Death Guard are there's a lot of demonic kind of nurgly things. One of these things are all the flies that are swarming all over the battlefield and infesting soldiers. They basically just drop and die in the presence of the Custodes. It's as if the Emperor's will is made manifest in the Custodes. Now, Camba Diaz of the Imperial Fist died heroically fighting against the World Eaters. He fell to plenty of them with his sword and shield until his sword broke. He fought on regardless, even as they butchered and mauled him, he fought on till the end. Eidolon, at the behest of Abaddon, manages to convince Fulgrim of joining their plan at the Saturnine. It sounds like fun for the Demon Primarch, a chance to break the stalemate and earn glory. So instead of investing a few companies for the effort, he will bring his whole legion to the Saturnine to attack the wall's floor. Archenland is recruited by Malcador to fix the flaw in the Saturnine. He hastily conducted a liquid filler, a sealant. He names it Lockcrete. It flows like water and sets us fast, becoming harder than ground rock. Drills will fail to break through it, but Malcador held off sealing the floor just yet. Dorn's plan is to draw the traitor forces to the floor and ambush them. Whoever is coming would be a worthy kill. Perhaps it would be Horus himself. It's a gamble, but it's worth the risk. Angron comes to the Eternity Warport, but this time he doesn't just come rampaging through. He speaks to the defenders. In accordance to the law of the arena, he offers them once a chance to submit. Their forces are outnumbered and they are facing a foe they can't hope to defeat. This is their final chance to turn their backs on a ruler unworthy of their loyalty. Angron demands their answer, and the defenders give it to them. All of their guns, weapons and artillery fire and rain down upon him. Sanguinius was actually inside Angron's mind as this was happening. He felt his brother die. Torn apart by a storm of bullets, plasma and shells, he felt sorrow at the death of Angron, but he was glad his pain was over. But then in a vision, snapped back to the crater where a gore of Angron pooled, he felt Angron's fury being reborn. He saw Angron's gore and armor pieces merge and regenerate. Angron was being reconstructed from death. Angron brought an oozing, still skinless hand to his mouth and licked the blood from it before saying, "My blood for the blood god." Angron stepped from the crater. His new form was larger and more brutal than before, and it was obvious to the horrified defenders that all reason faded from his mind. Nothing remained now but savagery and hate. The Stormseers of the White Scars call upon their elemental powers to counter the much potent magics of the Thousand Suns. The Scars storm ravage the demons and fell some of them. The Khan and Valdor take advantage of this and sally forth, riding to face the Neverborn and the Titanic demons. It's also noted that the Custodians somehow have the ability to render true harm to the demons. The unnatural forms of the demons had no defense against them. Not even the Titanic demons could withstand the spear of the Custodes. The demons were swept from the field. As Constantine Valdor fought and slew the demons, his spear gave him the truth of the demons that fell before him. Each demon he left screaming and clawing in the mud increased his understanding of chaos. As the White Scars closed on the Thousand Sons that summoned the demons, the sorcerers vanished. This ended the battle. The Colossi Gate was successfully defended. The Great Khan emerged victorious. Magnus was displeased with this defeat but said time was on their side. This whole thing wasn't a failure. He got what he came for. Magnus and Ahriman leave to make preparations. Abaddon's elite strike force started to arrive at the Saturnine floor. Tybalt Malt's team was the first to arrive and they were the first to be ambushed by the Loyalists. Mar got shot up badly as he laid on the ground bleeding. Loken crouched down and put a bolter in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Moving over to Fulgrim, who has brought his entire force to the Saturnine floor. Fulgrim is basically taunting and tormenting a young Imperial Fist. As he is about to end him, suddenly Sigismund appears out of nowhere. Sigismund barreling down at the Demon Primarch and hacking at him. Sigismund was actually hurting him, forcing him to stagger back. Sigismund continued to hack and swing at the Demon Primarch 3 times his size. Fulgrim kicked back Sigismund like a man kicking away an aggressive dog, only for Sigismund to get back up and come at him again with even more swings. Sigismund manages to bury his sword into Fulgrim, and Fulgrim shrieks in pain, picks Sigismund up and begins to choke him. Sigismund uses his actual chains attached to his sword to rip the sword out from Fulgrim and begins slashing him again. He actually hits him a few times. One of these times he hits him on his lip, ripping his lip open with blood. Fulgrim shrieks in pain and slings Sigismund to one side, screaming, "How dare you!" He strides towards the Primarch to actually give the killing blow before a familiar voice interrupts him. Sigismund's courage sometimes outstrips his abilities. Fulgrim smiles and glances back to see Dorn with his sword raised. Dorn finished with, "Mine doesn't." Dorn engages Fulgrim and begins smashing and cleaving him with his greatsword, but the greatest wound he would inflict on Fulgrim is revealing that he has got rused. The Mournables' plan has failed. Fulgrim allowed himself and his legion to be used as a distraction for a failed effort. Fulgrim deployed his entire legion against a wall that can be held by 1/10 of their number. Fulgrim's legion has been decimated for nothing. Dorn had hoped to trap Horus himself, but Fulgrim will do. Fulgrim, being Fulgrim, gets bored of the fight and vanishes, leaving Rogel, Dorn and Sigismund surrounded by a bunch of Emperor's Children champions. Eidolon is there leading these champions. He's the one that tests Dorn the most. Eidolon actually goes to slash Rogel Dorn with his sword, but Sigismund meets him instead. The sword goes in and hits Sigismund's collarbone. The weight of Sigismund's counterattack knocks the sword out of Eidolon's hand. Sigismund counters and slashes Eidolon with blood described as quicksilver splashing all over Sigismund. Sigismund then kicks Eidolon off the wall, sending him down the wall. We don't know if he's dead or not. The rest of the Imperial Fist then turn up and begin engaging the Emperor's children and wiping them all out. The Imperial Fist win the day and they are victorious. Abaddon is also trapped at this location with his fellow sons of Horus. Abaddon has been fighting with skill and tenacity, but more and more Imperials are pouring in and all hope is fading. As the wounding and bleeding Abaddon fought on, he reflected on the events that led him here and figured out what happened. Perturabo had manipulated him. This was Perturabo's idea. He had shown it to Abaddon, fanned his ego, tempted him with glory, made him willing a pawn and to do all the legwork. With Abaddon's first captain connections, Perturabo knew that Abaddon would invest the best of the sons of Horus, get the Emperor's children to play along, and broke an alliance with the Dark Tech Priest. All of the credit for this operation would be Abaddon's, so if it failed, all the blame would be his as well. If this failure Perturabo would have deniability. In death, Abaddon would be disgraced and dishonoured. He would be called Abaddon the Overreaching, Abaddon the Fool. Abaddon decided if he ever escaped, he would go after Perturabo. He would melter his war robots and fight the Primarch. He would rip out Perturabo's skull and ram Forgebreaker down his throat over and over until he burst the Primarch's corpse. Abaddon has always been a warrior in his life, his purpose, the skill of combat, the lesson of defeat, the joy of victory. These things were sacred for Abaddon. The warp is just a distraction, a mere weapon. Only fools worshipped it as some type of god. Magnus, Fulgrim and Lorgar, all fools. Even Horus was a fool. Let the fools worship the giggling abominations. This fight now is all he wanted. Perturabo gave him the chance to fight for victory as a man, not a demon, to claim terror in the old-fashioned way. For that, he owed Perturabo thanks. As Abaddon fought on, his world became simple. This fight was his life in the purest form. It was just skill and courage tested to the limit for no greater purpose other than for the sake of skill and courage. There is no longer a higher purpose. No emperor, no war master. There was only war. And he was Abaddon the warrior, so let them come, one and all. He was ready for them. 3 marine heroes came at Abaddon. Garrow attacked first, rendering Abaddon with 2 wounds that would have killed a lesser marine. Abaddon repaid him by punching him hard enough to smash him against the wall. As Abaddon moved to finish Garrow, Septitus blocked Abaddon's swing and dueled Abaddon. Abaddon was amazed and memorized by Septitus' swordplay. He felt sorry he had to kill him. Abaddon lashed out and cut Septus in half. It was then that Ered Ha, aka the Riven Hound, slammed into Abaddon and pinned him against the wall. There was no skill in Ha, just a beautiful kind of fury. Ha had Abaddon by the throat and began using his power fist to hammer Abaddon's helmet. Behind the malformed helmet, Abaddon's face became a mess of gore. Despite the repeated thrusts from Abaddon, Ha kept at it. The strength of his hammering seemed to grow with each of how much blood Abaddon lost. Abaddon's blade found Ha's throat and he stabbed through it towards Ha's brain. Finally, the Riven Hound died, but his dead weight kept Abaddon pinned against the wall. Abaddon saw Garrow approach with his sword raised and gleaming. There was no time for an escape. This was it. This was how he was going to die. Abaddon didn't want this fight to ever end, but the end came anyway. Then in a flash of light, Ha's body was lifted, shifted away, and Abaddon was teleported away. Garrow was left screaming, "No! No!" Abaddon was carried by Dark Tech priests to the safety and placed in one of the seats of a drilling craft. They tried to report things to him, but he wasn't responsive. He was whispering something over and over. When the tech priest checked him closer, they found he was weeping. He was whispering, "Let me go back," over and over. During all the chaos of this battle, Loken finally found Axeman trying to find a way out. Despite being the wrong Horus, Loken would kill him anyway. The fight was brief. Loken rammed a chainsword through Axeman's chest and then lifted him. He revs the chainsword, soaring into Axeman's body. Loken held him there for a bit, letting him, realizing a long drawn-out scream of agony. Then with a stroke of Rubio's sword, he beheaded Axeman. Dorn and Sanguinius meet each other to review everything that has happened. All the crisis points were defended with the exception of the Eternity Warport. Dorn and Sanguinius managed to eliminate 3 companies of Sons of Horus, including the entire Mournival. The Emperor's Children Legion was also decimated, making likely that Fulgrim has quit the siege because of this. Despite this, Sanguinius noticed that Dorn didn't seem satisfied. Dorn explains he wanted Horus himself, not Fulgrim, that he'd settle with. Also, another thing that bothered him, he only held Fulgrim back barely. Fulgrim cut the wall open. He thrust deeper and harder than any of his brothers. He came close to winning. If it wasn't for his excess and overconfidence, he would have. Dorn believes if Horus can harness the power of any of the Demon Primarchs properly, rather than have them raging about, then a Demon Primarch can end the siege in a matter of days. Such is their power. Sanguinius tells Dorn that the homeworld of the World Eaters was raised by an orbital fleet action. This means one thing: the loyal brothers are truly coming. The final scene has a Dark Angels fleet arriving. They're the first to arrive to stand on Terra with their loyalist brothers. And that is that for that book. I hope you've enjoyed this spoiler summary. If you've got any thoughts, feedback, leave it down below, and we can have a nice little chat down there as we always do. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. See you now. Have a great day, and bye-bye.